In the case of Robert De Niro, we were teenagers together, and he's the only one who really knows where I come from, and people I knew, and that sort of thing. Some of them are still alive. He knows them. I know his friends, his old friends. And we had a real testing ground in the 70s where we tried everything, and we found that, we trusted each other. It's all about trust and love. It's what it is.
The land had oil on it. Black gold. Money flows freely here now.
I do love that money, sir.
This wealth should come to us.
Hi, Mr. Scorsese. It's such a huge pleasure to be here with you. I can express how much joy I feel to be here talking to you about Killers of the Flower Moon. And one of the first things that I wanted to know from you about your work in this movie is what steps did you or your production team take to ensure that the Osage community would be accurately represented in the movie?
Well, at first, it was very important for me. As soon as I saw the book, they gave me the book, and I said, well, if you want me to be involved with anything that has to do with indigenous people and Native Americans, I said I had an experience in the 70s where I began to become aware of the nature of what their situation was and still is. I've been blithely unaware of that. I was too young. I was in my 20s. I didn't know. And it's taken me years, and I'm fascinated by how do you really deal with that culture in a way that is respectful. It also is not hagiographic. It doesn't fall into, I think, Rousseau, like the noble native, that sort of thing. None of that, but something with how truthful can we be and still have authenticity and respect, dignity, and deal with the truth, honestly. So as best we can. Having said that, that story, when I read it, it indicated to me that this would probably be the one that we could deal with that way. And particularly by getting involved with the culture of the Osage and actually placing cultural elements, rituals, spiritual moments. I wanted to play with that world in contrast with the white European world. And I felt that this could have afforded us the possibility. We weren't going to fall into the trap we think of the cliche of victims or the drunken Indian or the Indian wild, all of this sort of thing. And yet tell the story as straight as possible. It's a story of complicity. It's a story of sin by omission, silent complicity in certain cases. And so that's what afforded us the opportunity to open the picture up and start from the inside out.
And the film takes place in Oklahoma, and you were adamant about shooting the film there. I want to know from you, what was your first time visiting the place? What were your impressions? And when did you begin to visualize Oklahoma as the place, the right place to shoot the picture?
Well, I think the first time was in 2019, I think. It's a little confusing because of shooting Irishman, doing the CGI in Irishman, which was a longer post-production, 4 months, 5 months, and then COVID hitting. But I know we were there before COVID. We had at least 2 trips there before COVID. And for me, I am a New Yorker. I grew up in the Lower East Side of New York. I'm very urban. I don't understand weather that much or where the sun is when you're on the set. And when I got there, all I can tell you is those prairies are quite something. And they open your mind and your heart. They are just beautiful. And especially driving on these roads, straight road through a prairie, and on both sides, wild horses and bison and cows. But the wild horses just out to pasture for the rest of their lives. And it was like idyllic. And so I said, where do I put the camera at this point? how much of the sky, how much of the prairie? Should it be 185 or should it be 235? We got to go 235. You know, I want to see more of this land. And then I began to realize that the land itself could be sinister. In other words, you're in a place like this and you don't see people for miles, you can do anything. Particularly, it turns out 100 years ago. But when I saw that and I realized this is a place where you don't need the law. I mean, you have the law, but the law isn't working that way. The law, you can make the law work for you if you're smart enough, as we know now. But what I mean by that is that it's still a wide open territory. You have law, but it's a wide open territory. So the place, as beautiful as it is, can shift to being very sinister. And what I wanted to capture ultimately was the very nature of the virus or the cancer that creates this sense of a kind of easygoing genocide. That's why we went with the story with Molly and Ernest, because that's the basis of the love. The love is the basis of trust. So when there's betrayal that way, that deep, and we know that for a fact that it was that way, here's our story.
And I obviously have to talk about your longtime partnership, both with Leonardo DiCaprio and obviously Robert De Niro. You know Bob De Niro since you were a kid, and you've been working with Leonardo DiCaprio for over 20 years. You have a 50-year friendship with Bob De Niro. These two relationships have been defining the movie-making industry, and I wanted to know, why do you always go back to both of them when you are making new projects?
Well, in the case of Robert De Niro, we were teenagers together, and he's the only one who really knows where I come from, and people I knew, and that sort of thing. Some of them still alive. He knows them. I know his friends, his old friends. And we had a real testing ground in the 70s where we tried everything, and we found that we trusted each other. It's all about trust and love. Right? It's what it is. And that's a big deal, because very often if an actor has a lot of power, and he had a lot of power at that time, an actor could take over your picture. The studio gets angry with you, the actor comes in and takes it over. With him, I never felt that. There was a freedom, there was experimenting, and also not afraid of anything. I wasn't afraid to do something. I just did it. And years later, he told me he worked with this kid, Leo DiCaprio, and a little boy in this boy's life. And he said, you should work with this kid sometime. It was just casual. But with him, something like that, a recommendation at that time, I think in the early 90s, is not casual. He says it casually, but he rarely said that. He rarely gave recommendations. And so years go by, and I'm presented with Leo with Gangs in New York. And we worked together in Gangs. He made Gangs possible, actually. He loved the pictures I made. And he wanted to explore the same territory. And so we developed more of a relationship when we did The Aviator. Towards the end of it, there was a kind of something happening, a maturity with him. I'm not quite sure, but we really clicked in certain scenes. And that led to Departed. And then that became much closer. That was a project where Bill Monahan, him, me, other people, we were writing all the time and recreating that character that he played of Billy. And there's a trust. And even if we can't get it right away, we know we'll come up with something. Maybe other people have relationships where they come up with it faster. Well, we don't. We just work it through. It's trust, particularly doing Wolf of Wall Street, by the way. He came up with wonderful stuff that was outrageous. And so I pushed him, he pushed me, then I pushed him more than he pushed me, and we suddenly, everything was wild. And it's really quite something. But, and he had a good energy too on the set. That was also important, very important, because in the mornings I'm not really good, and I get on set, and then I'd see him, or Jonah Hill, or him and Margot Robbie, or him and Lily, and suddenly they're all like, hey. I said, okay, let's work.
I ain't got nothing but regret.